Passionate, driven, enthusiastic, euphoric. This is who we are as entrepreneurs. But how we leverage these incredible attributes to dream and build businesses that scale and grow is what this podcast is all about. Hello, I'm attorneypreneur Josh Brown, and welcome to Franchise Euphoria. Hello, welcome back to another episode of Franchise Euphoria. Today, I'm thrilled to have Tom Schwab on the show again as a return guest to Franchise Euphoria. You can find his previous appearance where he spoke about what inbound marketing can do for your franchise at indiefranchiselaw.com and just put Tom Schwab, SCHWAB, in the search bar and you will pull it right up. Today, though, Tom is here to talk about another marketing tool that very few, if any, people are talking about, and that is how to build your business by appearing on other people's podcasts. This is really important for all franchise owners and entrepreneurs to understand because getting good PR for your business is hard. Anybody who knows about marketing a business or trying to get the name out into the community about what you're doing is very, very difficult. But becoming a guest on podcasts of your choice is actually much, much easier and possibly more effective. So Tom will be discussing this and much more as it relates to marketing your business through guest podcast appearances. Hello, Tom, and welcome back.
Hey, Josh, I'm thrilled to be back. You know, this is the only time I would have to say that I'm thrilled to come back and talk to a lawyer again.
I love that. Yeah, exactly. It's not something that typically people you hear all the time. So it's a pleasure talking with you. I love your energy as we talked ahead of this recording, and I consider you a friend. And I just really curious and interested in what you're on to here, which, you know, I guess I would essentially look at as like guest podcast hopping, you know, in a very kind of strategic way to benefit your business from a marketing perspective. Let's kind of talk about that and tell me how you came up with this whole concept.
Well, sure. And I guess it's not as revolutionary as you would think because, you know, people have been trying to do this, you know, as long as there's been different mediums, right? So if you wanted to get seen, you'd go on a radio show and promote your band or promote the concert. If you wanted somebody to know about your new television show, you go on all the different TV shows and you talk about it and you promote it. Well, the problem with the TV and the radio is we've tried to get clients on local radio stations. And the reality is they are based on selling advertising. So if you as a small business owner go to the local television station or the local radio station and say, hey, I would love to be interviewed. I've got great content for your audience. Chances are you're going to get a call back from the sales department. And they're going to say, well, if you buy some advertising from us, I'm sure we can get you a spot there. But podcasting is different, right? Because most people aren't selling advertising on podcasts. They're selling, or they're really focused on content, right? They're trying to find content to give their audience. So for podcasters, they're looking for content. They're looking for guests. They're looking for engaging stories that they can share. So that's one thing. The other is that with radio and television, it's mass market. But with podcast, it's very, very niche, right? There's right now, I think it's 186,000 different podcasts in the United States, which is a wonderful thing, because if you want to reach people that crochet, you can get on a crochet podcast. You know, if you want to reach small business owners or entrepreneurs, there's different ones for that. And so with that, you can niche down very directly on an audience. And then finally, you know, the rules of business have not changed. We do business with, we buy from people we know, like, and trust. And I can think of no better way of getting people to know you, know your company's story, do all of that, than to be able to talk straight to your ideal customers for 30 or 45 minutes.
No, I think it's brilliant. I actually think it's a great strategy. I mean, you obviously appear on a lot of podcasts. I go on to a lot of podcasts, and I'm even getting more strategic in that myself because I've seen the benefit. A quick story to your point, which I think furthers your point, is I was on another attorney's podcast probably 4 or 5 months ago. His name's Jacob Sapochnik, and he has a podcast called The Enchanting Lawyer. And he had reached out to me because he just interviews, entrepreneurial attorneys and attorneys with interesting stories. And so he wanted to have me on. So I go on there and I, just like other podcasts that I've done and just sort of talking and tell my story. We have a great conversation. And about a week later, I get a phone call from a legislator in Portland, Oregon, who is a big fan of Jacob's podcast, routinely listens to it, heard me on it, and just by chance was in the process of preparing a franchisee Bill of Rights for the state of Oregon, and contacted me to see if I would be an expert witness and provide assistance in drafting of it. Now, if you think about that, Tom, that would have never happened in any other context, but for me going on to another podcast and somebody who's listening, putting two and two together and then just reaching out. And I think I'm sure you have stories like that, that further that point, but it's really an amazing thing that you can't buy, really. It's just a matter of putting yourself out there, and you can, just like you said, you can put yourself out there in such a targeted way, because podcasts are really just radio on demand.
Exactly. And, 2016, the car's going to be coming out, some of them where they can download podcasts right from their car. So the medium's only going to get stronger with that. And the other thing that we've seen is that it's working so much better than other content, right? So you write some great blogs, some great articles, but even if that legislator from Oregon would have found the blog on your site, well, you're just another website. He doesn't know who you are. Whereas when you're on your friend's podcast that he already, he likes this podcast host, it's almost like you get the authority from the host, right? If he thought enough of you to bring you on, you must be an expert.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point because, I mean, that the hosts of these podcasts who have good, viable podcasts and who've been doing it for a while and have the credibility of their audience, that transfers right over to their guests. That's absolutely true. And it also, just as you know, there's something different between reading something on somebody's page versus hearing them. When you listen to them, you can feel the context from which they speak. You can feel the intonations in how they say things. And from that, you just feel like you get to know the person, even though you don't know the person.
And we're seeing that difference in the data that comes out too. A good blog will convert at 1% to 2%. So 1% to 2% of the people that read a blog will actually take action and give you their email address and convert to a lead. And with podcasts, we're seeing results that are 25 times greater than that. So anywhere from a quarter to half of the people come there. And I think that
I was going to say, let's get it. I'm really, really excited about this. Tell me from an action perspective, somebody listening in right now who's saying, yeah, this is great. I really want to know how to do this. How should somebody who's never done this, never been on a podcast, whether it's a franchise owner or a franchisor or just an entrepreneur out there who's got a business, who wants to get a message out, who knows who their target market is, how should they go about this process?
Yeah, we've put this together and from our experience and refined it with our clients. And really, there's 6 steps to it. And you hit on the first one. You've got to define first who you want. Who do you want to talk to? And you can call it your ideal customer, your dream customer, whatever. But you need to know who that person is. Demographics of, what they look like, but also psychographics of how they think, because that's going to define what kind of podcasts you go after. So the first step is defining, who that person is. The second step is going ahead and identifying what you have to offer. So that's the what are you going to talk about? What extra things are you going to offer them? What makes you an expert? So looking at your customer, then looking at you. The third step is going ahead and actually trying to get on the podcast. And most people are intimidated by this, but if you present yourself as a professional, you'll get on podcasts. Now, there's matchmaking services that you can use that make this very easy. That'll do the introductions to the podcast hosts. But as long as you've got, we call it a one sheet or a pitch sheet that talks about, who you are, quick bio, what you talk about, how to get in touch with you, maybe a testimonial from somebody they know on there, and send that along with an email. Remember, they're looking for content. So that's how you get on. Then you go ahead and you have the interview. And there's all kinds of tips for that. And on our website, we've got all kinds of free checklists that you can go through. And that's where you want to go ahead and make it as easy as possible for the host. So, you want to be on Skype 5 minutes before the interview. You want to go ahead and email them the day before. Just touch base with them and say, hey, I'm looking forward to this. You want to reach out to them, on social networks, so it's not as much of a cold call. Go ahead and you have the interview. It takes 30 to 45 minutes. And then once that interview is done, make sure you promote that to your community, right? So they're going to be promoting it, but you want to be a good guest and promote that also because it helps you. Step 5 is really where you take listeners and turn them into visitors and ultimately leads, right? So you want to, in your podcast, make some kind of offer. Right, I already did this here where I said you can come back to our website. We've got free checklists and everything. It's at tmschwab.com/franchise euphoria. There'll be a link in the notes, the show notes where you can go there. So you want to give them something to take them from being a listener to come into your website. Once they get there, you send them that landing page, give them a couple free offers that can engage them. So you get their email address. Right. So now you've taken them from a listener to a lead. And so that's your automated marketing system. The final step is to have an automated sales system. So that could be where you have somebody call them. It could be where you nurture them and with some emails and some other content to make sure they're a qualified lead. Or it could be if you start getting some great leads there, maybe it's at that process just going ahead and reaching out to them one-on-one to talk to them about the franchise opportunity. And the magic on this is the seventh step, which really you don't need, but boy, it can make all the difference in the world. Everything can be outsourced or set up as a system except the interview. So if you've got somebody else that's making the connections and getting you on podcasts, somebody else that's doing the social media posts, somebody else that's setting up the system, all you really need to do is show up as the talent for that 30 or 45 minutes to do the interview. And we've got clients that are doing that, and they're on probably 5 or 6 podcasts a week. It takes them under 5 hours, and they're going out and talking to thousands, if not tens of thousands of ideal customers.
Weren't you recently on I think one of the people you're speaking of who helps people get booked on a podcast is Jessica Rhodes. You know her, don't you?
I do. In fact, I just did a podcast with her.
I saw that. Yeah. Where was that?
At interview. No, I'm sorry. Her podcast is Roads to Success, which is RHODES to Success. And we went through this, and there's a 30-minute discussion that we had where we go into detail on each of those 6 steps. And she runs a great organization. I've used her personally and with my clients, and she's gotten me onto some great podcasts.
Well, and it's funny too because she's reached out to me several times and has said, "Hey, I think this person would be great for your show. This person," and so she's coordinated through my assistant in booking people on the show, and she's been fantastic in doing that. And that is really, it seems to me that is a huge help for people because I know this firsthand, having a podcast now for 2+ years. Is the biggest challenge when you do an interview podcast is to consistently batch and get the interviews. And I have found it's only a challenge because it takes a lot of time, like for myself, and I'm sure a lot of people listening, they've got businesses that they need to tend to. I've got a law practice I've got to tend to. I've got clients to work with, and to reach out to people in a meaningful and authentic way takes time, and you either have to take that time or have somebody else take that time for you, because I don't believe, at least in my experience, I think you would agree with this, Tom, the people who reach out to me in sort of a spammy kind of way, I don't even respond to. But the people who reach out in a very authentic way that says, here's what I do, here's where I think the benefit could be, I think there could be a mutual benefit, really like what you're doing, that sort of thing, makes it very easy for me to say yes, and for other people to say yes. Would you agree with that?
Very much so. And I think when you're first starting out as an unknown quantity, that's probably the hardest part. Probably takes 90 days to really pump or to prime the system. And if you present yourself professionally from the very beginning, even when you're an unknown quantity, that you've got the professionally done one sheet, you've got even an assistant that's setting these things up, that makes you look different than the person that just copy and pasted, dear podcast host, and sent it out to 50 people. And I would say that most of the time, though, you can have an assistant do something and you get the credit for it. So, for example, once this podcast goes live, I know that you're going to go ahead and put tweets out promoting the podcast, and you'll tag me in it. So I'm going to see it in my stream every time. It's going to pop up TM Schwab, and I'm going to think, wow, that's great. Josh just promoted me again. Well, I know it really isn't you scheduling those tweets. I know it's your assistant doing it.
Tom, you found me out. Me out.
But you get the credit for it. The next time I see you, I'm not going to say, "Hey, Josh, next time you talk to your assistant, could you thank her for promoting me?" No, you're going to get the credit for that.
Well, it's a great point you make, and I struggled with that for a while because I tried to do it all, and I felt like having an assistant come in and do that was really, at first, it just didn't sit well with me because it seemed like, if they're promoting through my social networks, it really should be me. But then the practical reality is you just can't, you can spend all day doing that. What I do and what I would recommend for people is to not just completely turn that over. So like I have my assistant who has this amazing social media schedule that she's created where it breaks down when things are going to be posted, and there's going to be this kind of article about, entrepreneurialism, this kind of article about franchising, this type of quote, that sort of stuff. But what I do as the business owner is I try to just schedule out 45 minutes to an hour a day, and you can do less or a little bit more, to where I sort of go and sort of follow all that stuff, chime in, engage in conversations, because we all know social media is about the social part of it, and you can throw stuff out there all day long, but the real gold is when you start engaging with the people who are responding to what you're putting out there. So that's what I found to be to be successful in terms of what I'm doing, and it seems to work well with what you're trying to do, and making sure that you're sort of assisting the people, entrepreneurs, business owners, to be guests on other podcasts, to engage in the social infrastructure, but to do it in a smart way where they're best utilizing their time.
That's exactly right. And, my background is I'm an engineer by degree, and my first job out of college was running nuclear power plants in the Navy. And I've always been amazed that I found it easier to run a nuclear power plant than I see most people trying to run a business. right? Because at least with the nuclear power plant, there was systems, there was procedures, there was things that worked, and all you had to do is reproduce those, and you had success. And too often now in business, it's, you got a tool here, a tactic here. How does it all go together? And having that strategy and a clear step-by-step process makes it so much easier, not only to get predictable results, but also to leverage it so that you can find somebody else to do that for you. And it's, it's not rocket science. It's not nuclear science here. We're just trying to build a system that gets in front of ideal customers and has a discussion with them, and then connect with them so that we can have more discussion, and then ultimately help them solve their problem by buying our product or service.
Now, I'm curious your thoughts on this, because I know if you, a lot of times, I'll listen to podcasts and I'll hear one person interviewed on multiple podcasts, and sometimes you get unique nuggets throughout each of their interviews. Other times it's sort of the same thing over and over again. I'm curious what you recommend to people through your strategies and through your teachings and your materials, in terms of how do you get out there, get your message out there, be strategic with that, but not just be robotic, where you're just saying the same thing over and over again, sort of keeping it fresh and interesting.
Well, that's true. And I always tell people that you go onto a podcast to tell your story, not to sell anything, because nobody remembers a pitch. No, they don't want to hear it. But if you tell an engaging story that they can relate to, they'll come and interact with you more. And the same way, no podcast host wants to have a pitch fest on his show or her show. They want to hear a story. And I think small businesses can tell a story much better than a large corporation. A McDonald's franchisor is not going to get out there and tell the story of it. Everybody's heard that. But some small business that hasn't been heard of, that's got a great story, that's interesting. That's engaging. And while you're on the same style podcast, hearing similar stories, you got to be fluid enough. So if you go to Roads to Success podcast, you're going to hear some of the same stuff, but there'll be different pearls. And really a lot of that comes from the host too. Jessica has a different insight on it. She asks different questions than you do, Josh. And the other thing is that, with 186,000 different podcasts, you're not going to be on every one, but also people don't listen to every one. One of our clients and a mutual friend, I think, has been on, it's 100 podcasts right now. And my wife said to me the other day, is he still doing podcasts? Because I've never heard him. And I think that's a testament to, well, yeah, he's not on the podcast that you're listening to. He's going after business owners and entrepreneurs. He is not trying to get on the marathon running podcast or some beauty podcast.
But to that point, and tying into that, is that podcasts are evergreen. And so if by chance your wife Karen wanted to pipe in and listen to one of those, they're evergreen. Once they're recorded and once they're out there and once they're on iTunes and all the other podcast mediums, somebody can listen to my very first episode from 2+ years ago just as easily as they can listen to my newest episodes, which is a huge benefit, because you just never know when you put yourself out there when it's going to come back to you.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that we discovered why it's important to send people to a landing page, right? So you don't just tell them, hey, come to my website, tmschwab.com. Because if you listen to this 2 years from now, the offers that we talked about and the things that we're featuring may be totally different. And that's just going to frustrate you. So that's why we always, do / Franchise Euphoria, the name of the podcast. So even if somebody listens to this, it's 2015 now. If it's 2018, they can still go there, see what we talked about, see the offers that we did there, and it's meaningful to them.
Well, that's a really great point. Now, tell me, in terms of how you are working with entrepreneurs and small business owners, if somebody's listening in and is interested and would like to work with you, or at least learn more, tell me the process you go through. And are you working with individual clients? Are you doing this more of as a group thing or an online product? Or how are you yourself promoting this?
Yeah, right now we work with individual clients, but really there's not the capacity to do individual clients, nearly as much. So what we tried to do is put a digital product together. It's not rocket science. You can learn it and do the step by step. So what we've done is put a free product together with all of the videos, a lot of the information that you would need. So if you just want to watch the videos and learn the process that way, you can. We also have a course. It's a digital online course that has the videos. It has all the checklists. It has the workflows that we use. It has sample emails. It has the sample landing pages. Pretty much it's a toolbox of everything you need to find out what podcast you want, to get on the podcast, to have a great interview, and then to turn those listeners into customers. So we've got that as a digital product also.
Tom, that's a really, really, I think, smart move, what you guys are doing, honing in on the podcast sector and really kind of taking it A to Z through the marketing lens as well, because that is one of, and I can just speak to this from experience, is putting all that together, putting your funnel together, setting up your email marketing campaigns, automating yourself to a certain extent so that things are working for you and benefiting you, yet you're not spending all your time. It's a whole huge process that I'm going to venture to say 90+% of entrepreneurs would love to have somebody else do for them.
It is. And if you've got all the templates there, it makes it so much easier. And setting it up is, it can be done. And the other thing that I would say is that, some people will just say, well, I only want to do part of it. I just want to get on the podcast. Well, you can, but you're not going to see the results with it. Or there's some people that say, I'll just build the system, and as soon as they come to my website, I'll be able to capture them as a lead. Well, what makes you think they're going to come to your website? With the tens of millions of websites out there, what are you doing to draw them there? And really, it's content that attracts people, and content can be really hard to produce. And I've seen this firsthand. It's tough to write a blog. I'm not a natural writer, but I can speak for a half hour, and it's a great way to do it. So you can do that content, and then we've also been repurposing it. So say we could take this interview that we just did here, Josh. So I could go ahead and record this and have it transcribed. For $1 a minute through a service like Rev.com, I could take a 30-minute interview and get 30 minutes of transcription out of it. Now, chances are there's probably 3 or 4 blogs in there. I'd have to edit them a little bit, but there's also probably 5 or 10 great one-liners that you had that I could highlight and send those out as tweets. We've even started to take some of those, quotes, the good ones, and we'll go to a free service like Canva or Pablo, and you can make the images behind them, put the words on top of it, and those things work great as social media.
Yeah, and you're really good at that. I've noticed that you're really good at repurposing that, and I've tried to do the same thing, just in terms of taking like the audio podcast I have, and I had my assistant is basically putting all of them, as in the process of doing that, putting them all on my YouTube channel. And someone might say, well, why would you do that? YouTube is video based, and this is an audio podcast. But the point is, people consume information in all different ways, and so you have to put it out there in all the various ways. That's why through, like you said, Rev.com, where you do the transcription, some people like to read them, some people like to listen to them, some people like to watch them. And the more you put yourself out there, you can repurpose it all from that one recording. I think that's really, really smart.
And from the standpoint of what's your most valuable resource, as a business owner, it's your time. So if you can get the most out of that 30-minute interview and not have to spend any more time and just have to spend a little bit of money to repurpose it, then it's a great way to really multiply your time.
Well, I just think this is really great information. I think the franchise space really needs to hear more of this. I get quite frustrated as I review franchise documents and work with franchising companies to learn that still a lot of them don't take advantage of social media, don't really understand that social media and marketing aren't two separate things. They're one and the same. And if you're not taking advantage of the opportunity to engage in blogging, in podcasting, getting yourself out there, figuring out different and unique ways to market your message, you're just falling behind, because that's where the people are seeing it. And it's actually the most efficient, effective way to do it. So really, really, really great message. Great talking with you, Tom. Where can people find this information and contact you?
Sure. My website is tmschwab.com. And that's the best place to find me and find all the free resources. We've put that landing page together just for Franchise Euphoria listeners. If you go to tmschwab.com/Franchise Euphoria, that will have all of the details, the things that we talked about here. I'm also on LinkedIn. Love to connect with people there. And one final story, we do have one franchisor. I always get confused, franchisee, franchisor. But he's done this, and he's set up a new franchise, and he's had great success with it. And what he talked to me about was, he said, I can go ahead to these fairs where all the different franchisors are there. And he said, I'm just another one down the line. And they just walk from one to another. But he says, if I can catch them earlier in their thought process and talk directly to them, he says, they won't even go to those big shows. They'll be drawn to me. And I think that's, the way to stand out in a crowd and to be known, liked, and trust.
No, I think that's great. You know what I'd love to do down the road, if you're comfortable with it, not to put you on the spot right now so you don't have to answer, but I'd love if you got the permission from somebody you worked with down the road to really walk through an entire example of how you worked with somebody. And if it's in the franchising context, all the better, because I think this kind of conversation, I think, is beneficial. I think it's hard to get down into the nitty-gritty details because there's so much that goes into those 6 or 7 steps that you identified. But walking through a practical example, maybe on another show, I think would be fantastic.
Oh, that would be great. We could do the audio version, and if we wanted to, we could do a video version too, and
sure,
show how the content's repurposed. There's some things that you could show. So I'm all in for that, Josh.
All right. Sounds fantastic. Well, thanks, Tom. It's always awesome to talk to you. And again, you're always doing some creative, good stuff, and always just have such energy, which I really, really enjoy. So thank you for coming on again. And I look forward to having you on for a third time here in the near future.
Thanks for being with us today on the Franchise Euphoria podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to go to iTunes and provide a review. Also, please remember that although Josh Brown is a licensed and practicing attorney, nothing contained in this podcast should be construed as legal advice, because it is not. The information contained in this podcast is general and educational in nature, and none of it should be relied upon as legal advice. That being said, if you have questions for Josh and would like to contact him, please email him at josh@franchiseeuphoria.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you tune in to our next weekly episode.